Thank you for those online that you don't need to be crowd controlled, and those in person that you're all helping. And all right. Absolutely. Balance the room. All right, Rev Mary, we are settled in the room and you are welcome to begin.
Thank you so much, Rev Sara, and thank you all for gathering. Welcome to this forum about how we hold each other in community and in covenant. Thank you so much for being here. Let's do what we do, which is to light a chalice. I'll light this one here at home with these words from Emily Richards. We gather today in a sacred space, kindling a fire that burns here in our chalice and in our hearts. We gather to honor our covenant and engage in congregational life, doing the necessary work to ensure that this community thrives. We gather together as a people of faith, guided by love, a love that burns as bright as the flame in our chalice. We light this chalice as we have done so many times before, for the warmth of love, the light of truth, and the energy of action.
All right, so today the plan is to discuss all the ways that we hold covenant, and part of that will be that we'll introduce members of the Safer Congregation team and the Healthy Congregation team, and we will try to explain what the difference is between those two teams. We will outline some circles of support that help us to address conflict when it arises in the congregation. We'll point to some resources within OUC and without, and we'll talk about next steps in this whole process. And so from there, I pass it back to Reverend Mary.
So if we could just take the slides down for a second, I'm going to give a little bit of context about what we're doing and where we are. I want to thank the UUA Institute for Right Relationships team training. The training is something that the new Healthy Congregations team and I are taking together, and we're learning a lot. We're going to show some slides that talk about the circles of support for when there's tension or conflict in a congregation, about who does what are the roles, and what are the responsibilities and authority of each of those. And the slides are taken right from the training. The language of how things are done and what the names are might not be exactly the same as what we do at OUC, which is fine. I'll help translate that. And this is the theory and the recommendation about how things might work. It's also the case that what is recommended might not have been what has happened here at OUC in our history and in our heritage. So just know that there is no shame or blame here. It's all about what we are learning, and we are learning together. So we can ask questions like, what happened? Is what we did effective? What did we do? Was it effective? What did we learn? And what might we do differently in the future? So just know that there's a context for this. This is the aspiration of where we might be moving to, or at least an aspiration for discussion about who we might be and how we might handle conflict. And of course, we decide how we do that together. So Reverend Sara, would you like to talk about the community supports with our next slide?
To talk about community supports. So the first slide here of these interlocking circles of support is about the community. And I love that we're starting here because community is also sort of the soft and implicit stuff, the culture stuff. So the community can support a culture that supports restorative process. The community can encourage people in conflict to engage in the processes. And the community can do the work of communal learning to deepen the abilities of all to engage in interpersonal conflict in healthy ways. So, there are institutional supports that we put in place. There are bylaws and policies and teams and all of these formal things. But when conflict arises, it still will take all of us, whether we have a formal role or not, to support healthy resolution of conflict. And so everyone in the community, whatever your formal role may be, has a role in supporting a culture of healthy conflict transformation. Our OUC covenant says that conflict is normal, and it's how we address it that is most important. So that is also part of what the community can support through our culture, through our individual encouragements to one another, and through engaging in the process of learning how to deal with conflict in a healthy way. And now back to Rev Mary for the covenant.
Thank you, Reverend Sara. So within this large circle of community that holds everything, there are some smaller circles and boxes. And one of those is our covenant or covenants. And so the covenants are created in order to set clear expectations, to offer clear guidance on solving conflicts directly, an expectation that folks will manage things directly as much as possible, and clear guidance about who to turn to when there might be more help needed to address something. So one of the ways to talk about and think about a covenant is to say it's a way to put our culture into words. It's a way to express our aspiration of how we want to be as a community, and a way to express our culture as we want it to be. So OUUC has a covenant. It's been around for a while, and my understanding, what I've been told, is that it was a covenant created out of a time of strain and conflict. And I've proposed this last year that we add a behavioral covenant to the current covenant. And a behavioral covenant is more specific about how we will behave together. It's very action-oriented, and it's focused on the individual instead of the collective. I think a behavioral covenant is needed in order to make our expectations about behavior very clear. One of the things that we can say is that all people are welcome in our community. All behaviors are not welcome. There are some behaviors that are okay and some that are not, and so we need to be explicit about what those are. The OUUC covenant as it is currently is very fluffy and vague in parts, and it's communal, which is great for an aspiration or a vision. It doesn't have individual responsibility, and it doesn't have specific actions. And I know there's some anxiety and worry about the behavioral covenant. We're going to talk about that some more, and you'll hear a little bit more about that. The other thing I want to mention is that OUC also has a non-covenantal behavior policy for when conflict arises, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later as well. So back to you, Reverend Sara.
Thank you. Yeah, so now I get to talk about another circle, another of the smaller circles here, the Safe Congregations team, or the Safer Congregations team. So this team was originally named Safe Congregations, and just a note about language and how, as we start to understand more, we tweak it. It's now the Safer Congregations team, and it's a safer congregation policy because we recognize that safe is probably, most likely, definitely impossible to maintain 100%, right? So what we're working toward is to be safer. We can never 100% be safe. So the work of the Safe Congregations team and the Safe Congregations policy, Safer Congregations policy, is to set limits for community safety. This team and the policy would be what we consult if we need to do a limited access agreement. For instance, if a known sex offender wanted to participate at OUC. But there's other reasons for limited access agreements. It's also where destructive persons process would take place. So if we are working through process of addressing a destructive person within our community, this team might be called in for that. It holds the process for asking someone to leave the community if that were to ultimately become necessary. Members of the Safer Congregations team are Barry Zicker, Wendy Tanner, and Rick Brandt-Kreutz, none of whom were able to be here today. Rev Mary and I also serve on the Safer Congregations team with our roles. Now, the Safer Congregations team and the Safer Congregations policy have been in place for many years here at OUC. And in my time working on the team, which has been 15 years now, things that the team has worked on, we have done limited access agreements, not because of a known sexual offender, but for other reasons. There were other individuals in our community who needed limited access agreements for whatever reason. We have also done safety plans for members or individuals in our community who needed extra safety because of things that were going on in their life outside of OUC. And this team has been able to help put safety plans in place for individuals who needed them. Those reasons might be things like domestic violence or other things such as that. So this team works with situations that arise as needed, and also makes sure that we're following our universal precautions, because known offenders is only one risk. And so we also do universal precautions of background checks for those who will work with minors or vulnerable adults, and a policy of having 2 adults and other things such as that. And if you have any questions, you are always welcome to ask me what's going on with Safer Congregations. And now I'll pass it back to Rev Mary for the Healthy Congregations team.
Thank you, Reverend Sara. And I think you're planning a volunteer training on the Safer Congregations policy, is that right?
Thank you, tech team. I know it's hard when you're switching back and forth. Yes, we will be having one of our volunteer trainings this year. We're doing a monthly volunteer training on different topics. One of those will be about how we do the Safer Congregations policy and how we all can help with supervision of minors and so forth.
Thank you so much, Carbon and Teresa. You're just the best. You just roll with whatever we hand you. So thank you for that very much. So then let's talk about the healthy.
Yes, Dorothy, you have it.
Talk about healthy congregation team. Healthy congregation team, but it's not on the slide, and that confuses me. Or am I missing something?
You are not missing something. That is in what Rev Mary referenced earlier about how these slides are from the training, and so some of the language will be different on the slides versus what we're using here at OUC. So yeah, where it says right relationship team, we're using Healthy Congregations team.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Dorothy. I was just going to go right there. So the training calls it Right Relationships Team. We've called our team the Healthy Congregations Team. And that's in part because healthy is one of the values that was identified, that you, the congregation, identified as a part of OUC's vision, envisioning a world that is loving, just, and healthy. So Healthy Congregations Team seemed like the right name to me. So you can just substitute that in these slides. The slides are, I wasn't able to change the slides, so we just have to adapt. So a Healthy Congregations Team or a Right Relationships Team leads the community in updating the covenant or adding to the covenant, and also tends to the culture and skill building. So a Healthy Congregations Team might offer some book study or training about how to think about conflict, how to build skills in handling conflict, what does it mean to be a healthy congregation, and how do we help support that? The Healthy Congregation Team members can also support individuals who need assistance with direct conversations, so they can help hold the space for people to talk directly to each other if that's needed. And the Healthy Congregations Team is a starting point for a more formal restorative process that might need to happen between individuals or between groups, or even for the congregation as a whole. So I think some of the Healthy Congregations Team members might be there today. I'm going to name them, and if you're there, if you would just wave. I can only see the back of your head. So Martha Nikoloff, Don Melnick, Alice Curtis, Dan Donahue, Barb Okeson, and Megan Johnston is a consultant. And then I sit with the Healthy Congregations Team as the staff support, and of course the board is also kind of on the side there, helping to support this team. Now, unlike the Safer Congregations Team, the Healthy Congregations Team at OUC is new, and I haven't heard that there's ever been one. And so we are in the process of forming this team. These folks came together last spring, and we're learning together. The slides from today are a part of that training that we're doing together, as I said. And you're great. The next slide is the purpose statement that we crafted together for the Healthy Congregations Team. The heart of the work of the Healthy Congregations Team is the OUUC covenants. The purpose of the Healthy Congregations Team is to help support healthy communications and relationships at OUC so that we may live into our covenant. This support may take the form of listening deeply, offering skill building, inviting reflection and discussion, helping to navigate and transform conflict, and modeling healthy communications. So that's a big charge for this group of people. I'm really grateful that each of these folks said yes when I asked them about being on this team, and I'm really inspired by the work that we are doing together. If there are members of the Healthy Congregations Team there, I'm wondering if there's anything that you'd like to add.
Looks like no, there's nothing anybody wants to add. So back to me for the board. So yes, we have another circle in here, the board. So the role of the board in this work is to create policies, appoint the leaders, and fund the trainings. The board may also receive appeal requests from those in conflict. And they would formally approve any vote to remove someone from leadership or membership or to leave the congregation. Now, the board has created this non-covenantal behavior policy and became sort of identified as the go-to place for conflict because of that policy. The Healthy Congregations team didn't exist at that time, so now there will be work done to rewrite the policy to take into account the Healthy Congregations team. And so process may change as these two different institutional bodies, these teams, work out the policy of where things go. But right now, that is what is held by the board. And back to Rev Mary for the last circle in there.
I was waiting for a thumbs up from Teresa. Thank you. It's the back and forth that we have to attend to. And thank you for your patience. So one of the circles in this is the minister. And the role of the minister when there's tension or conflict is to provide pastoral care for all. So when conflict arises, the role of the minister is to be the pastor, to wear a pastor hat. The minister also can create worship to support any culture shifts that might need to happen, speaking about theology and spiritual practices of engaging in conflict and restoration, and that's the minister's role as a spiritual leader. The minister is expected to have boundaries regarding boundaries with conflict, boundaries with congregants just in general, and particularly with conflict, so that the minister does not take a side. It's rare for a minister to take a side when there is conflict between two individuals or groups or within the congregation. So part of the role of the minister is to set healthy boundaries and to keep them and to model that that's an expectation. And it is highly unusual for the minister to lead a healthy conflict resolution or conflict transformation process. Not never, it's just rare, and it's not the first place for resolution to begin. So there need to be some other places for that to start. Now, particularly that last thing might be new information for some of you, particularly in the culture of OUUC, because when I arrived here 4 years ago, there were a lot of conflicts waiting for me. And you told me that they were waiting for me because there wasn't any structure in place for conflicts to be addressed. And so the expectation was that when the new settled minister came, she would take care of these conflicts that had been long-standing, and so people came to me. So one of the things I learned pretty quickly is that the minister's role was unclear and that there wasn't a structure in place to handle these things. Because of some past conflict, a team that had been in place was significantly challenged, and really it wasn't their job to handle the conflict that arose, and so things had just kind of been simmering for a while, waiting. And so here we are now. Now that we are mostly through COVID, kind of, and able to do some things to put infrastructure in place, that's what we're doing, is creating the formal structure, helping to clarify the roles and responsibilities, and updating our policies or creating new ones if we need them. So really, I want to emphasize again, this is not about shaming or blaming. It's not to say that anything that was done in the past was wrong. It's simply to say we did the best we could at the time. What did we learn? We're learning now, and what might we do differently? So if we could take the slides down then, I just want to mention that from this morning's sermon, that was part of my role as a spiritual leader, saying that I would, in the creation of our OUUC Heritage and History timeline, that my role is to help create the sacred space and offer invitations for learning, healing, and growing. And I don't do that alone. The minister can't do the spiritual growth for other people. Nobody can do the spiritual growth except for us. And the minister's role is to attend to the spiritual growth of the whole community. And whether or not there is learning, healing, and growth in the community is up to all of us, not just me and not just you, but all of us together. So I have some more worship services planned throughout this year about some related topics like conflict transformation and boundary setting and covenant, and things that I think will help clarify and bring into our spiritual awareness again and our spiritual practice of what it means to be together in community and in covenant. I can help clarify the theology or name some theologies about why and how we do those things, and invite us into the spiritual practice of learning, healing, and growing. So what we've been talking about today, as Reverend Sara said, is a model of the institutional support for our community. It's the institutional structure that we can put in place so that it's as clear as possible about where to go and what the expectations are when trouble arises. But the congregational health doesn't belong to one person or to one team. We are all responsible for our congregational health, and we are all accountable to each other. It takes all of us to be in community, and it takes all of us to keep all of us healthy. Back to you, Reverend Sara, for some resources.
Great, thank you. So the resources that we have in place, we have a covenant. Check, it exists. And we can find it here on our website. We also have the non-covenantal behavior policy. Now, as I said, this policy may be updated and changed, but it does exist as is, and you can find it on our website if you'd like to look at it. And then the behavioral covenant, and that work began in this last program year, and it will continue, and there will be a more about that at a forum on December 5th in the after service forum. So that conversation continues, and please plan to attend that forum to find out more. And then we have all of these teams, and you all are most welcome to reach out to members of a team with questions, concerns, or to ask for help. So now we would like to turn this to your questions. If you are online and have a question, please raise your digital hand so the tech team knows that you want to speak. Questions or comments. And if you are in the room, please raise your actual hand and wait until we bring you a microphone so that the people online can hear you, because no matter how loud you are in this room, you cannot reach through Zoom with just the power of your own voice. So, any questions or comments? All right, one in the room.
I just wanted to express my opinion that I'm glad we're not using the right relations, that we're using healthy community, because in my mind, that's associated with our work with local indigenous tribes, even though it's a little bit different word, but so I like the healthy communities choice.
Yes, and I just, to clarify for everyone, so you all know, there is an associated with OUC team called the Learning Right Relations team, and they are engaged in the work of learning how to be in right relationship with our indigenous neighbors. And so, yes, that would be confusing language if both teams had similar names. Go ahead, online.
So this is Lee. Thank you for the opportunity. I am confused. Well, okay, so the name of the group to Healthy congregations from right relationships is confusing to me, because healthy in most vernacular means physical health, body health, as opposed to my interpretation of right relationships has to do with more justice, not law, but justice and equity issues. As a member of the LGBTQ community, we have had a lot of experience with injustice, and we have given a voice, we've been given a voice, and the communities across the nation are more in right relationships with us now. But I don't see healthy relationships as being able to adjust, to address justice issues, if that were to come to the surface. Just comments.
So thank you so much for your comment, Lee, and for holding up the justice issues. That's something that you do really well. So this is what I would say about the choice of the term healthy congregations. Just like with us as people, when we talk about someone being healthy, it's not just physical health, it's physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual health that defines us as an entire person. And so it's the same for congregations. A healthy congregation is physically, spiritually, emotionally, psychologically healthy, and it has good relationships within itself and with its community. So when we use the term healthy in relationship to an individual and to a congregation, it is the broadest possible interpretation of that word. So that was the intention. And my recollection of the discussions about the term healthy, the value healthy, that was chosen for OUC's vision was it was healthy in that extremely broad sense, in all the ways that an individual and a congregation can be healthy. And a healthy world would include a just world as well. It can't be anything else. And, I just want to hold up again Dorothy's comment about right relations, and right relationship is a term that has been used in this community and elsewhere to specifically speak about relationships with Indigenous peoples. And so, not to be confusing, we were really looking for another term. So the UUA training used right relationships teams. We're using something different. The role of the team is the same. It's just a different name. Does that help?
I understand the reason for using the word healthy.
Mm-hmm.
I do have a concern that it doesn't really address healthy, just, and I can't remember the third part of our covenant statement.
Loving, just, and healthy.
Yeah.
Right.
That's my confusion, because people in minority status, and I am thinking mostly of people of color at the moment, they don't always have a language or a covenant to work with to address their concerns about us as white people.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm hearing an awful lot of comments out in the African American community of big issues coming up across the country about those white people. And I want to hear every one of them express their sense of horror and traditional injustice.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just keeping my mouth shut because they need to vent.
Mm-hmm.
But I need to find a language whereby I can say, I am with you. And I want other people to have a language where they can say openly, Lee, I am with you as a member of the LGBTQ community. I'm comfortable with that language. I want people to be comfortable with their language and not hidden under obtuse words.
Sure.
It's just a comment.
Yeah, thank you for that, Lee. And what I would say is the intent of the Healthy Congregations team, the purpose, as I said, is to help us live into our covenant. So it's going to be in the language of our covenant that we have loving, just, and healthy. That's where the language of justice is going to be. And that's the agreement about how we'll be together that will inform our actions, how we are with each other here, and the values that we bring out into the community. So it's not as much about the name of this team, it's about how we describe our covenant and how we describe our intention, and that our actions inform our vision into the world of loving, just, and healthy.
And I love that. I love the word covenant.
Mm-hmm.
That is a big umbrella that I really, really enjoy being under.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lee, for your comment.
Thank you.
Anyone else online or in the room? Oh, yeah, Teresa will bring you a microphone.
Thank you, everyone. So I want to recognize, this is Liz Clement, by the way. I want to recognize, starting out, that I am still struggling to find the right words for this, so please bear with me. I'm really glad to see focus on finding and building a structure to support things like this. And I think structure is necessary, but I think always and in any setting, a structure that exists can only be as helpful and only has the integrity of the people who are involved in not only putting it in place, but keeping it in place. I also, I'm not gonna say any names, but I know that I myself, being a human being, and all of us being human beings who have been in relationship of different kinds with each other for some periods of time, may have had experiences with each other, maybe one or two, or maybe a longer history and patterns of relationships and experiences that may lead to discomfort between some congregants and some members of the Healthy Congregations team or the Safer Congregations team ourselves, and feelings of hesitation to work with certain members of those teams because of our experiences, which are also very real, and just a foundational trust and safety comfort issue as well. So can we talk a little bit about plans for confidentiality and discretion, and also if it becomes important to people in the congregation who are in conflict, or to an individual that is seeking or identified as needing assistance, to perhaps to work with certain people or to not work with certain people for whatever their reasons may be. What's in place to allow for that?
So I'll take that one first, and then I'll see if Rev Mary has more to add. Yes. All right. So to the issue of confidentiality, absolutely, all of these teams should be maintaining confidentiality around the work that they're doing. And if that's not happening, then that needs to be brought up, because these processes should be confidential to the extent that they safely can be. Again, with the work, for instance, of the Safer Congregations team, we are confidential to the limit of where that becomes unsafe. So I'm a mandatory reporter. If I knew that there was a danger to someone, I would need to report that. It can't be kept a secret, but that's different than confidentiality. And the other part that you spoke to, Liz, and thank you for lifting that up, is yes, sometimes because of history, other relationships, I mean, we all may have layers to our relationships with one another. And if there's a conflict of interest or any other reason why someone should recuse themselves from process, then that process of recusal is in place for the Safer Congregations team for sure. If there's anybody who has a conflict of interest or even just has another layer of relationship that makes it feel awkward, then you would move aside from that process, and we usually bring in another person to carry that process forward in that recusal. And Rev Mary, I'm sure you have something to add.
Thank you, Reverend Sara. And thank you for so beautifully naming that. Yes, of course, confidentiality, and yes, of course, as many options as possible. There are relationships in the congregation that many people don't know about. And so what I thought I might offer is an example. So recently someone met with me and said they wanted some help having a facilitated conversation with another person. And as a part of that conversation, then I learned about what was happening, what this person was looking for, had some conversation with the other person, and brought it to the Healthy Congregations team for discussion. Now, I did not share any names with the Healthy Congregations team. At that point, we processed it. We talked about confidentiality as a team. We talked about what a process might look like because we're figuring this out still. And I went back to one of the individuals will do with the other to offer members of the Healthy Congregations team to help with that conversation. That may or may not include me because of some characteristics of what's happened. And so it's an ongoing process of conversation and even setting up what will happen in this restorative process so that everyone knows who's involved. Everyone is comfortable with who's involved. And if there wasn't anybody on the Healthy Congregations team who these members were comfortable with, we would have found someone else to help facilitate the conversation. So one of the things I hope you're hearing is that there's a lot of care and preparation to create the container for a restorative conversation to even happen. And that's the important preparation work so that the restorative process can, so that there's a good invitation for the restorative process to be one that is healing and one of growth. Does that help with your concern, Liz? And thank you for naming it.
It's going to take me a little bit to process that. I don't know right now. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, there's a couple more in the room. So
I think that we need to realize that this is a new feature for OUUC and that everybody's going to be learning what that process is, how we are going to meet the needs of our congregation in a healthy way, and that and it's going to take time. I really believe that. It's not going to happen overnight, and we have to be patient with each other and ourselves.
thank you, Barb. And Dorothy?
I'm Dorothy Gist. I'm very glad I'm here today because I'm learning a lot, and I'm thinking about all the people who aren't. And related, I think, to Liz's example, I was thinking, I didn't even know I thought this until she was talking, and I thought, wow, I'd always assumed if I had a conflict, I'd have to go to the healthy, I pictured it as the Healthy Communities group and say, this is my problem. And so now I haven't had a conflict here, so I'm very lucky. But I'm thinking, what is it the plan for communicating to people in the congregation a request for support or an entry into this to make it, and also I guess to make it inviting when we have to start with a small conflict, who would one go to, and making it clear that you don't I mean, I remember my college dorm and we had, I don't know, judgment committee or something where you had to go and tell 10 people what you were upset about. Memories are dangerous. Anyway, thank you.
So I'm going to pass that one over to Rev Mary since it's primarily about the Healthy Congregations team.
Great. Thank you, Dorothy, for the question. So this is how I would hope it would play out. So let's say, Dorothy, that that you something happens and you're like, ouch. I don't like what happened. I don't like this interaction. I don't want to let this go. I want to talk to somebody about this. And you are at dinner with a friend and you say, this thing happened at church and ouch, and I don't like it. And what I would hope is that your friend would say, oh, what do you think needs to happen with that? Can you talk with that person? And you might say, yeah, I think I can talk to that person. Or you might say, I think I need some help. I would want some help talking to this person about my ouch. And so at that point, you could go to a member of the Healthy Congregations team if you knew they existed. You could come to me. You could go to a member of the board. You could go to another member of the congregation. And what I would hope is that no matter where you went, you would get pointed back to the Healthy Congregations team, a member of that team, and someone would say to you, are you comfortable reaching out to a member of that team? And if the answer is yes, great, and invite you to do that or help you do that. And if the answer is no, then to say, is there somebody you would be comfortable talking to? And so you'll notice that it takes all of us, right? There's any number of places that you could go with your worry. And when Reverend Sara and I talked about the congregational culture of restoration, it takes all of us to be able to say, no matter where you might go, to say, this is our institutional process. Are you comfortable with that? Do you need help with that? So yes, it's going to take some education and knowledge for this new process and this new team to get known. That's part of the intention today. And so all of you now have knowledge that you can take to your groups and your circles and the people that you know of. And when someone comes to you, you now know what to do. So that's what I hope would happen. Does that help, Dorothy?
It helps so much that I'm almost in tears because I realize anything related to our congregation, I bring a lot of garbage from previous, religion experiences. And I have to keep being reminded about the lack of, that there isn't a hierarchy, there aren't a whole bunch of rules, and the idea that we are all a covenanted community, and that is what we have here, not some pros and some, professionals and others. Anyway, so the response was completely helpful to me. Thank you.
And if I could just add, if this were an example or a question that had to do with a safety concern between congregants or between staff and congregants, similar process would be to go to any member of the Safer Congregations team, or to me, or to Rev Mary, with that safety concern. And if it was something that you weren't sure how to handle, that's still the right place to bring it so that we can help be like, what needs to happen? How can we help you navigate this? So similar process for the Safer Congregations team. All right, do we have one online? Yes.
We have some things that if you could read.
If I could read from the chat, yes. So reading from the chat, Lee Doyle, I want to clarify that I believe learning into right covenant with all is important and appropriate to strong community relations. And Lee got some love for that. And Alex says, I don't have a voice, thanks COVID. Sorry, Alex, I hope you feel better soon. And then not everyone has family or safe family, so it helps to feel safe. And how do you create guidance for people that come here that do not have the tools? And how you build emotional and spiritual intelligence, creating a healthy space helps ourselves, and sets boundaries that some people have never had. Thank you for that, Alex. Absolutely. All right. Then there is one more in the room.
If I might just add to that, thank you so much, Alex, for naming that. The skill building and the culture, creating a culture of support for restorative process, that doesn't happen overnight. Trust me, if I could wiggle my nose and make that happen here, I would in a heartbeat. And I don't have that power. None of us has that power. It's what we do together. So that process of skill building is something that we are beginning again, just like we're beginning pretty much everything as we move into our post-COVID world and what that looks like now. So yeah, not all of us learned the tools, and not all of us have experienced safety, and not all of us have a history that allows us to trust easily, particularly in a faith community where some of us have been wounded by our faith communities. That's just as real. And so thank you for naming that. And thank you for being a part of a community where we aspire to create something that's countercultural and different.
Another comment? Rev Mary wiggles her nose very effectively every day and at every service. Thank you. All right. So another comment or question in the room.
Just a comment, really. I was pleased to see that one of the, and I may not say this right, but one of the tasks, if you will, of the Healthy Congregation team is really, I think, taking a proactive way to kind of come up with ways to help educate the congregation about things like, how do I set boundaries? How do I redirect some? Like if someone comes to me and tries to triangulate or something, how do I redirect them to the right person? How do we practice building those skills? And as a part of the adult faith development team, formerly known as the adult education team, I would really welcome the opportunity to work with the Healthy Congregation team to see how we could assist in any way in building that kind of curriculum, classes, whatever. So thank you. I'm glad that's a part.
Thank you, Linda. Yeah. Do we have any more online? Okay. Any more in the room? Questions or comments? Rev Mary, anything more you want to say? No? All right. So we're going to move to closing then. So thank you to those online. Thank you to Rev Mary for being here while sick. Thank you to those in the room. And bear with me 1 second while I get my tablet turned back on with one hand, because I have closing words. So I will extinguish this chalice with these words from Krista Tavis. It is our work, shared with each other in covenant, that creates and sustains this beloved community. We extinguish this chalice, but the light of this faith lives on in us together, in our hearts, minds, bodies, and spirits. Amen, and blessed be. Thank you all. Thank you all.